And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most interesting topics in the world of Indiana basketball. This is our 138th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 530th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, September 12th, 2019. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Monday when a new recruiting period opened. This means that coaches can make in-person, off-campus contacts with recruits. This recruiting period lasts until November 10th. What coaches do on the first day of a recruiting period is often seen as a sign of their top priorities, and it can carry some weight with prospects. So, how did Archie Miller spend his first day on the recruiting trail? By visiting Culver Academies to check in on 2020 commit Trey Galloway, and then hightailing it to Minnesota to meet with the most important remaining target in the 2020 class, Dawson Garcia. By accounts told to me, the visit went well. And while I know that visits like these almost always go well, I mean, what coaching staff in their right mind would flush an opportunity with a top-flight recruit down the toilet without making the most of it? There seems to be legitimate optimism that Indiana will have a real chance in this recruitment. And that's big. Garcia is a four-star prospect who is ranked number 29 overall in his class, according to 24/7 Sports. So he's at the very top of the four-star list. And seeing as how he is 6'11", with a versatile game that can go inside and out, it's easy to see why Indiana and many other schools are making him a priority. Indiana loses Deron Davis from its deep front line after this season. Next season, Joey Brunk will be a senior, and Trace Jackson Davis will be a sophomore. So there's a pressing need to bring in another talented young big man to pair with the enticing trio of wings already committed in the class of 2020, Galloway, Anthony Leal, and Jordan Geronimo. And Garcia would not be a developmental big. He projects to have the size, skills, and maturity to be an impact player from day one. What needs to happen next is that Garcia needs to schedule an official visit to Bloomington and then actually take it, unlike Caleb Love, who canceled his IU official that was scheduled for this weekend, a move that was not really a surprise. Oh, and by the way, the top in-state prospect in the class of 2021, Christian Lander, scheduled an official visit to Bloomington for Hoosier Hysteria on October 5th. His AAU teammates Anthony Leal and Trey Galloway will also be there that night. Seems pretty positive and more than balances out the Love news. But back to Garcia. Look, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't slightly concerned that his visit hasn't already been scheduled, as he already has visits scheduled to other schools. But it does sound like one will happen. It's just a matter of finding a date that fits. And I know that I often tell you not to pay too much attention to a recruitment until an official visit actually happens, because until then it's kind of all just chit-chat and speculation. But I'm breaking my own rule just a bit on this one because of how important of a recruit Garcia could be in terms of impacting Archie Miller's pivotal 4th and 5th seasons, and because of some of the positive things I heard this week. Let's hope those positive things bear fruit and that Garcia decides to visit, and that Indiana then gives itself a real shot. The foundational 4-year, 3- and 4-star prospects are important, but if you want to hang banners, you better also be sprinkling in guys like Garcia on a regular basis. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-hosts for this week's show. Ryan and Andy are both off this week. After being jilted by Indiana for the open assistant coach position, Ryan is setting his sights even higher and polishing his resume for the USC AD position.
I like to think that my arrogance is a driver of success.
Meanwhile, Andy is running simulations of the 2019-20 season on his computer and doing mock bracketology projections to get in shape for the upcoming season.
That is how you're a champion.
It is. But enough about who isn't here. Let's focus on who is here. To my right, ladies and gentlemen, he is the new Assembly Call fan favorite, a veteran high school basketball coach in the state of Indiana, the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club, and one of the best damn IU football tailgaters around.
He remembers the days when a movie cost $1. Heaven help you if you ever decide to pop your collar. Play hard, but remember, fake hustle is a crime. He's the coach and it's Tonsoni time.
I really missed that music not being here the last couple of weeks. He is the coach, Brian Tonsoni. Coach, what's on your mind this week?
You know, everyone hold on to their seats. I'm thinking Hoosier hysteria with the announcement of Christian Lander and Leo and Galloway coming in 3 weeks to Bloomington. It seems like there's a full court press to get Lander to to be an Indiana Hoosier, and I'm all excited for that. That's the purpose for me of Hoosier Hysteria. Is it's all about the recruiting. You have to do it for the recruits. It's good. Put on a show, and everyone be safe in the workout and the scrimmage, and then everything will be okay. But
I
it is
like
getting
Hoosier Hysteria.
I don't. But I do like it for recruiting. So that's pretty exciting. And as we'll talk about later, all of the predictions and things are magazines, preseason magazines are coming out. And it's time to just really seriously looking at what Indiana has to do to get back to being one of the best teams in the Big Ten. And we hope that gets started October 5th.
Absolutely. And to my left, he is a senior at Indiana University, the former sports editor for the Indiana Daily Student, and one of our 2 new interns for this season, along with Cameron Drummond. He is Dylan Wallace.
90% of his basketball opinions are moronic.
Ryan, that is absolutely uncalled for. Dylan, you and Cameron posted your introduction post on Inside the Hall. Why don't you use your opening statement tonight to introduce yourself to the Assembly Call podcast and radio audience as well?
Yeah, well,
and don't mind Ryan. Just ignore him.
Yeah, Ryan was chirping me earlier on Twitter today, so I'll have to meet up with him on the show sometime. But I first want to just start by thanking Jerod for allowing me to come on the show, and for me and on behalf of me and Cameron, we're really excited to help out Assembly Call and Inside the Hall this year for basketball coverage. But to kind of introduce myself, I'm from Crown Point, Indiana, so the Northwest region. People call it the region. A lot of people down here don't really like that because we say, if they don't know where it is, we just say Chicago, and they're like, you're not from Chicago. So but yeah, I'm from the region. I never really, growing up there, I never really understood the hype surrounding Indiana basketball. And it was kind of funny because a lot of my friends were Indiana basketball fans. And I don't know, it's just because I was trying to be like the kid that was like not just like jumping on bandwagons, and I wanted to be cool, but like I just kind of like despise them for no reason. I didn't even watch it that much. But so I came here freshman year in 2016. Everyone says you got to go to a basketball game. So I got tickets to the game, and they played North Carolina. North Carolina was like ranked like 3rd, and I mean Indiana just like they easily won. And I mean I've been to NBA games, NFL games, you name it, and I have never been in a place that loud before.
That game was awesome. They
followed it up the next year with Duke, even though they lost. So I mean that's when I kind of understood I got it. I was like, okay, I got it. Even the high school basketball down here is a lot different than up where I live. And so I really kind of just realized what Indiana basketball is all about. And so obviously, as you mentioned, I've been with the Indiana Daily Student. I was sports editor there for 2 semesters, covered a plethora of teams here, women's basketball, women's tennis, volleyball, men's soccer, the Little 500. But ever since I've gotten here, my goal has been to cover Indiana basketball. I've spent the last 3 years going to games with friends and whatnot. But, if you're in media here, you're going to want to cover Indiana basketball at some point. And so I am extremely excited, and as is Cameron. But, I covered them a little bit last year for the Journal-Gazette in Fort Wayne, as well as for the IDS occasionally. But this will be my first full season. Hands on deck covering the team 24/7, and I couldn't be more excited. And again, very appreciative of the opportunity that you and Alex Bozich are both giving me and Cameron. So I'm excited. Hope I can bring some good content this season.
Absolutely. You guys have already done a great job, and as has been noted, and as I'm sure that you have been told, you are trying to avoid being the first 4-year graduating seniors to not make an NCAA tournament at least once during your time at Indiana since I think the late 60s, maybe. Certainly since the early 70s. So you, Devonte, Duran, we've got to try and avoid that ignominious distinction as we go through this season. We don't want that. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about this week. We'll run through a few Hoosier headlines like we always do. Then we're going to discuss the preseason Big Ten projections that have been coming out about the conference, about Indiana. What are they getting wrong? What are they getting right about Indiana as we look ahead to the 2019-20 season? All of that. And we're going to answer your questions, of course, as we always do. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. First, let's talk about tickets. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's as if they're so big, they feel like they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. But not SeatGeek. SeatGeek cares desperately about the satisfaction of their customers, which is why a quick glance at the App Store shows over 50,000 5-star reviews. Why? Because SeatGeek delivers a better process for buying tickets. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, and then they rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. And the user interface communicates it all clearly by displaying tickets on an interactive seat map so you can see right where they are, and by using a color-coded system for value. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced, and every purchase is fully guaranteed so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the fastest and easiest way to find tickets when my wife and I want concert tickets. It's always the first place that we look. Take note that SeatGeek is currently showing IU Ohio State tickets for as low as $65, and you can meet up with the coach at his incredible tailgate before the game. He can give you details about that after we get done with the ad read here. And then, of course, this.
Can a brother get some coupons?
Of course. Best of all, SeatGeek will give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today and use the promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. Okay, before we jump into Hoosier headlines, Coach, do you want to let everybody know where you're going to be Saturday morning? Because the Tonsoni tailgate has become like the weekly meeting spot for Assembly Call folks, Hoosier Huddle folks. I love all the tweets and pictures.
Yeah, it's always nice when people stop by, and Joel was out there, Lee was out there, but we're in the purple lot, the road right by Mellencamp, the backside of Mellencamp, and the practice fields. We're right by the grass portion of that parking lot, gate 10 and 11, and you'll see the Assembly Call sign and my unforgettable new hairdo. Stop by and grab some biscuits and gravy.
Okay, so not a lot of headlines that we haven't already talked about, with obviously the recruiting stuff, with Garcia, with Christian Lander. Those were some of the big headlines. But guys, one thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is an annual thing, and it always kind of proves for to be good for for useful fodder on the show, and that is the Inside the Hall Hoops top 25 players in the Big Ten. It came out this week. The top 5 will come out on Friday, but if you've kind of seen the list, it's always relatively easy to kind of figure out who's going to be there in the top 5. No surprise that Michigan State placed the most guys in the top 25, as well as the also being considered list. They had 5 guys. Maryland, Ohio State, and Purdue all had 4 guys. Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin all had 3 guys. You'll notice there's a particular team I haven't mentioned yet. Iowa had 2 guys. Penn State had 2 guys. Minnesota had 2 guys. Still haven't mentioned Indiana. Indiana with 1 guy on the entire list, Trace Jackson Davis. I was not pleased about this. I made my thoughts known candidly to Alex Bozich in a G chat that we have ongoing. But Coach, as you were looking at this, I feel like we both had the same first reaction going through the list of players, that a particular player was not on there that we both feel deserves to be on there.
Yeah, Rob Finney not even being considered. I think people could maybe make an argument that he's 27, 28, whatever, but to have him play such an important role for the Indiana Hoosiers last year and his injury meaning so much, I just find it hard to believe that he's not at least being considered if he isn't in the top 25.
Yeah, and Trace Jackson Davis did make the top 25. He was number 24, which is interesting. And they, look, Romeo was ranked high last year. Like this list, that Alex and Dylan Burkhart do, they tend to, to not penalize freshmen just for being freshmen and really try to project them. So I was surprised by that, because Trace is not a guy that I would have quite that high, even though I still have high hopes for him. But yeah, I agree that I would have had Rob there. Dylan, as you looked at that list, what were the most glaring omissions or maybe misplacements of players, IU or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of go off what you just said, I was a little shocked that Trace made the list. He slotted in at 24 just because we haven't seen him play yet. But I mean, if obviously if there's a highly rated recruited freshman coming in, like a 5-star like Trace, you have to at least consider it.
And he's the only McDonald's All-American coming in.
So I kind of understand, where that's coming from, but to put Trace ahead of all the other Indiana players, you mentioned Rob Finney, guys like possibly Devonte or Deron Davis could maybe sneak in there, but I mean, I don't know. I was a little shocked by that. And then also Purdue's Aaron Wheeler also made the top 25, and I didn't really see much from him last season to put him ahead of any of the few Indiana guys I mentioned, or, to be named one of the top 25 guys in the Big Ten.
So I think we're all in agreement, that Rob is probably the most glaring omission that we think should be on there. And we're going to get into that more in the next segment when we talk about, some of the things that I think the preseason projections are getting wrong about Indiana. Coach, as you look through there, who would have been the second Indiana player that you would have had? Would Trace have been the second guy for you, or is there even somebody else that you would have thrown into that others being considered, or even the top 25?
Well, you're guessing what role, and as Trace as a 5-star player coming in would be the second player. But you also got to look at role and minutes, and I think, Devonte averaged 15. We'll talk about this later. He averaged 15 points a game the last 7 games. He's going to be averages 15, be a top 30 Big Ten player. And I think you look at every team who's going to be their go-to guy, and that guy might need to be part of a conversation about top 25 plus. And again, I don't know that I'm ready to make Devonte a top 25 Big Ten player, but I do think he would be the third player that makes sense. And we just don't. We have a couple guys who haven't played due to injuries that could also be some wild cards when we're talking about the top 25, top 30, whatever at the end of the year.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing with Devonte. Look, people who've been listening to this show know, that I'm pretty bullish on Devonte kind of driving the Devonte breakout senior year bus. And, for some of the reasons you said, Coach, he finished strong last year. I think having a defined role is really going to help him. Obviously, a lot of that depends on having a full season with Rob Finney at point guard because it allows Devonte to do what he does well. I think his reputation hurts him, and the fact that we've seen him so much for 3 years and people are not quite buying into the consistency, which is really hard to argue with, frankly. I understand why that is out there, but I do think you can make a reasonable case projecting forward for him this season that he could be on there. And, you say, well, why don't we talk about what guys have done? But look at all the freshmen. With all the freshmen that are on a list like that, you're kind of guessing and projecting what they're going to do. And so I think if you apply that same thing to Devonte and look at the role that he'll have, I think he's a guy that could have made it in there too. And I think he will be on, on a list like that at the end of the season. Dylan, is he the guy that would be for you, kind of the other one that would be in consideration?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I kind of agree with you. I really think that this senior year, it might be the first full season that Devonte is consistent and really has, a really nice season. Because before, Romeo Langford, Juwan Morgan, it was kind of those guys' team. They were the attention. And when, Romeo was hurt during the NIT, and even when he didn't play too much in that Big Ten tournament game against Ohio State, you saw Devonte really step into that kind of primary scoring role, which I think he's going to have to do once again this year. And I just think the confidence he built off of the end of last season will probably carry into this season. I think he kind of knows that, aside from kind of Rob, he's going to be the one kind of running this team in the backcourt. And from that perspective, I wouldn't be surprised if he's the leading scorer. And so, like you mentioned, I think he'll definitely be a top 25 player by the time the season ends.
And can we just take a moment to acknowledge Nebraska and Northwestern, neither one of whom posted a single player on this list? Could be a long season in Lincoln and in Evanston.
I'd like to be on this list and go 0 for 4 from 3-point in my, sophomore season. There's a Purdue player who went 0 for 4 from 3-point line. And so I love defense just like as much as everyone, but you're going to be a top player. You got to be able to shoot a little bit.
Again, but that's the projection. That's a guy that's going to be in a new role that they're Aaron Wheeler, I believe, is who you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about Nogel Eastern. Didn't hit a 3-pointer last year.
You're talking about Nogel Eastern. Well,
right?
Again,
and
I think
Nate, the Reavers from Wisconsin, if you're going to project those guys, then you also got to know the guy who's going to get shots for Indiana. And he did it when that role was defined for him, averaged 15 points a game. So I'm sounding like an angry fan here a little bit. My bias is coming through. But heck yeah, if you're going to put Reavers on there, Nogel not make a 3-pointer, and Aaron Wheeler, who averaged 4.7 in 11 minutes, you can at least have Finney.
Nogel not make a 3 Eastern. There we go.
Yeah,
and he'll just call himself Nogel never lost to IU Eastern right now, and we need to change that because.
And all media do a good job, but the Michigan guy predicted us to win the Big Ten, and we finished, 9th. So
maybe he's overcorrecting a little bit.
He's overcorrecting, or he's just naturally wrong. But that's why I don't like to make too many projections. No, he's a good guy. I'm sorry. He's all good.
Hopefully he's wrong again this year too, as he overcorrects and it comes forward a little bit. All right, coming up. Well, we got to take a break here real quick, Dylan. But let's get to that next segment. We're going to stick with the topic of preseason Big Ten projections as they've been pouring out over the past week. What is Indiana's average ranking? What do we think about it? What might the pundits be missing or getting right? We'll discuss that next on the Assembly Call. All righty. Sorry about that, man. By the way, I forgot to tell you, in the chat, we usually post messages to each other in the chat, and I'll I didn't post any messages here, though, but usually I'll put like, hey, we're about to break. Sorry, I didn't let you know about that, and I'd already started the music.
No, I mean, all I was going to say was you mentioned how no Nebraska or Northwestern players were on the list, and I was just going to say I grew up a Bulls fan, and I just don't like Fred Hoiberg. I thought he was a horrible coach when he came to the Bulls, and I disliked everything. So I was just going to make a funny comment about like, yeah, well, nothing against Nebraska's team, but from what
now you've made it for the YouTube. Now you've made it for the YouTube audience.
Yeah,
because they're all here.
Oh, that I dislike Fred Hoiberg a lot.
Okay, well, hopefully he's not as successful at Nebraska as he was at Iowa State. I certainly hope that. Nice to see you all here live. We always appreciate the chat mob being here and being active. That is awesome. So go see Coach for the tailgating. I need to make it up for a football game one of these years.
Several people stopped by. Lee Butler stopped by.
The great Lee Butler.
Yeah, I'm probably forgetting someone because by the end of the tailgate, my mind
things are a little loose by the end of the tailgate.
Things are a little fuzzy by hour before game time. So if I missed you Saturday, hello. Beer, cheese curds, and music. It doesn't get any better.
That's right.
They're all there in the purple lot.
That's what the tailgate is all about. Okay. Let's see. We've got a couple of Hoiberg is trash comments in the chat. So Dylan,
that might be my cousin, to be honest.
Oh, is it?
I wouldn't be surprised.
By the way, you do the bar that you need to clear, which someone may have tweeted you this, is Ben Ladner, who was unabashed that he was not really an Indiana fan, just viewed the team very clinically. His analysis was really good, so people let him get by with it, and his NBA shirts and his unabashed love for North Carolina.
One on underneath this.
You wear okay? So see, Dylan's at least wearing
my quarter zip.
Have you? Okay, so here's the question though. Like now that you've been here for 4 years, do you consider yourself an Indiana fan now? Because it's weird. Like when you're a student and you're media, like can you fully embrace the team since you're covering them? If you didn't start as a fan, how was that for you?
I would say for the first 3 years, freshman through sophomore, junior year, yes. But this year, no. I'm gonna be okay. Like,
can you just flip that switch though?
Yeah. Definitely. If I won't when I'm watching them play in Assembly Hall this year and I'm covering them, I don't think there's anything. I mean, I don't think there's going to be anything inside me that's going to be trying to cheer for them. I'm just going to be focused on covering it objectively as I can because that's what I
guess that's the job.
Do. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, when I was freshman through junior year, yeah, it was fun being in the stands as a student and going crazy. It was a lot of fun. But this year, I mean. I like to cover teams. I love being in the media part of it. So, yeah, I can kind of flip the switch on and off.
Interesting. I cannot. I have very little ability to actually do that. That's why we created this show as a safe haven for those of us to cover the team, but be clear about our bias, which is that we are cheering for the team. Okay. We ready? So that segment, by the way, that was 20 minutes. So that was a good, healthy segment length. Probably try and go for about the same time on this one. Okay, so we're all good here. I'll introduce this. Coach, I'll probably go to you first, and then we'll just go back and forth and see where this one takes us. So one thing you can do, Dylan, if there's a point that you really want to make, obviously, you can try just to jump in, but sometimes it's easier in the chat to just say hey, I want to jump in here, and that way I can kick it to you.
Okay.
So we avoid verbal car crashes.
Yeah, that works.
While we're on air. Ryan doesn't mind doing that, but, we try to keep things a little bit organized around here. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. All right, here we go.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Christian. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to join the chat mob during our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays and see all the between segment banner, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and Dylan Wallace, one of our two student interns for this season. And guys, we kind of started getting into this conversation a little bit in the last segment, but I want to talk about some of the preseason projections. And I sent out a tweet earlier this week after seeing another preseason projection come in that had Indiana. I think this one had Indiana at 10th. The one before that was 9th and 11th. And I said, to hell with preseason magazines and their predictions. I'm ready for the season to start. I don't know how good Indiana will be this year, but I sure as hell think we'll be better than 9th, 10th, 11th in the league. And this was strongly worded for a purpose. And I do, when the preseason projections about Indiana are not good, I do get sick of them. But I may not have worded this quite properly because it's not that I'm, look, as we'll talk about, I think Indiana will finish better than 9th, 10th, 11th in the league. But I do think, given all the question marks about this roster, about this team, and when you think about how most media members go about the process of doing projections, which I think in a lot of ways is looking at the returning scoring that a team has, and when you see that teams have a couple double-digit scores, they almost are automatically going to go above a team that doesn't return any double-digit scores. I get why Indiana is in the 9th, 10th, 11th spot. And so it's not necessarily that I don't understand the arguments why people are a little bit down on Indiana, but I think Indiana will be better than that, and I do think that there are some things that those projections are missing, which we're going to get to. But, Coach, just to kind of lay out the context here, I did go through and I compiled all the projections so far from Street and Smith's, Lindy's, Athlon, our friends at Three Man Weave, SI, even the Vegas odds. And so if you kind of compile it all together to get a composite, preseason projections for the Big Ten, Michigan State was number one for everybody, of course. Then you've got Maryland, then Ohio State, then Purdue, Michigan 5th, a little curious to me, Wisconsin 6th, Illinois 7th, that's another one that kind of jumps out, Iowa 8th, Penn State 9th, and then Indiana at 10th in the composite rankings, followed by Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska, and Northwestern. What are your kind of opening thoughts about these projections that you've seen and where they have Indiana?
Well, I would have our listeners consider tiers. And I think if you look at tiers, then you can understand where these projections come from, and we can disagree of being in at number 10. I think there's the top three are pretty clear in some order, unless an injury happens or they just play poorly. I see the top three, Michigan State, Maryland, Ohio State being in some order there, probably with Michigan State at the top. And then from 4 to 11, I think you have teams that all are somewhat similar, depending on what you prefer to look at will be the way you rank them. And that's Purdue, Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Penn State, Indiana, Minnesota. They all have reasons to be optimistic. They all have question marks. They have lost points. In Indiana, really, Purdue has more points leaving. Michigan has more points leaving. So if that's the metric, Indiana fares well there. Iowa has more points leaving. But it's also what's coming back, and I think that's what hinders Indiana right now in a lot of the media. And what we talked before the show, though, is from a coaching perspective, if you have some players coming back, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th players have to fill similar roles to the guys who left in order for that production to be there or be better or fill it. It's about the team chemistry and the roles. And we kind of hinted upon that in the top 25 discussion. Devonte Green is going to average double figures this year. I think it's simple.
He sure
to
as
say,
heck better.
And if not, then we're 13th or 14th maybe. But, Indiana has some unknowns. And I think that's puts the 10th and 11th rankings, gives a little chip on the shoulder. You have Race Thompson, who wants to show what he can do. If Hunter can play, I'm sure he's going to be wanting to prove something, and we have to see it to believe it. But I don't think Indiana's in the bottom of that second tier. I think they're better than Iowa. I think they're better than Penn State. I think they're better than Minnesota, and that would move them up to 8th. And then there's some question marks with Purdue, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois as well. And given a few breaks, can jump up to maybe the top part of that second tier. So I see somewhere from 6 to 10 maybe 5 to 10 being the ceiling. And so, we got to wait a little bit, but that's the way I'm looking at this from the start.
It's so interesting because, Michigan State, clear-cut favorite. And you're right, Ohio State and Maryland, I mean, those are the two teams that you would put up there. But those teams are not devoid of questions. I mean, Ohio State's going to be breaking in a lot of young guards, even though they have Caleb Wesson to kind of anchor them down low. Maryland, a lot of talent, but, as Andy Bottoms is fond of saying, they're still coached by Mark Turgeon. And they tend to really struggle when they have a lot of expectations. I understand giving Purdue the benefit of the doubt as a top 4 or 5 team just because of, I think Painter's earned that and what they've done recently. So that's fine. Michigan lost a ton and they lost their coach. So that one's curious to me. Illinois certainly is because look, they've got Frazier, they've got DeSunmo, but that's a team that was really bad for most of last year. So you're really expecting a lot of guys to jump forward. And Wisconsin has a couple of junior guards that they can lean on to help replace Happ, so I kind of get that one a little bit. But I'm with you on Penn State and the Iowas and some of those, and that's why I really see Indiana, somewhere in the 7-8, probably 7-8 range, with a chance to bump up a little bit. Dylan, as you look at it, what are your initial impressions of these projections coming out? Are they fair, or do you, see Indiana being a little bit better preseason?
So I'm not surprised that Indiana's that low just because of what happened last season. And, obviously, Trace is a 5-star, All-American. But other than that, I don't know, people looking from the outside probably don't really see Armon as a factor. They probably don't, all they see is they're gaining those two. They probably don't see Joey Brunk as that big of a addition either. So, I'm not surprised at all that Indiana's ranked this low. But to kind of your guys' points, I do think that they will be higher because – I can justify, Michigan State, Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan, and Wisconsin kind of maybe. But then after that, like
Michigan?
I said maybe. Michigan and Wisconsin are kind of like maybe. But then after that, like Purdue, you just lose so much in Carson Edwards. You even lose a lot in Ryan Klein. And then even Eifert, he was a tough hustle guy. And their guards are like they have some young guards, Isaiah Thompson, Brandon Newman, Mason Gillis, who could be good, but I just don't see, enough. And the coach was kind of talking about Nojel Eastern earlier, and he's a really good defender, and he's kind of poised when he plays the point guard position, but he does not compare to Carson Edwards on the offensive end, not even close. So, I don't see Purdue. I could see Purdue being a lot lower than they are. I think they're like 4th in the composite that you set up. Iowa, no more Tyler Cook. Bohannon's has hip surgery. Who knows when he's going to come back? There's, who knows about them. Illinois, I also agree. I don't understand the hype around Illinois. They got those young players, but like you said, I didn't see enough from them last year. They were 7-13 in conference play. They were out rebounded every game. They shot 34% from 3, 13 turnovers a game. I didn't see enough from them last year to put them this high in kind of preseason rankings.
They've got the hard parts to grasp onto that you look at when you're projecting, because Frazier's a junior, double-digit scorer. The big guy down low, put up good numbers, and DeSunmo passed up the NBA to come back. And so I think everybody looks at that and you automatically kind of vault that team up. But we've seen a lot of times that natural projection or progression that you expect to happen doesn't necessarily happen. So they're a team that I feel like has a big range, because I can see how you could make the case for best case scenario, Illinois becomes an NCAA tournament team. That does seem within the realm of possibility, but man, it seems more likely that they're maybe a little bit better than last year. And if they're only a little bit better than last year, they're still not very good.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's kind of the same thing with Penn State. They still have Lamar Stevens, Mike Watkins. It's just are they deserve to be higher than Indiana? Probably not. So I definitely see Indiana as high as 6, maybe 5, but definitely higher than 10th for sure.
Yeah. So, so when you look at this, okay, what are the preseason projections getting right about Indiana? We've talked about this. No proven go-to scoring option. We get that. Upperclassmen usually win in the Big Ten. And Indiana's upperclassmen are talented but mercurial. Do we really know what to expect from Devonte and Deron and Justin Smith? We can talk ourselves into the idealized versions of those players, and we've seen the flashes, but we admit as much as anybody that there's question marks there. And frankly, there's still question marks about Archie Miller. As much as we support him through 2 seasons, he has yet to take this team to an NCAA tournament. And so, especially as you're looking at it from an outside media perspective, I understand some of that trepidation. Here's what I think people are getting wrong, Coach. And I think, a couple things are really big. Everybody talks about the outside shooting, how bad it was last year, and kind of projects that forward this year. We've talked ad nauseum about this. The outside shooting is not going to be nearly as inefficient as it was last year. Now, we might not score as efficiently around the basket, but our three-point percentage will be better. And I think when you look at Rob Finnessy's season stats and what he did in big play, but you don't take into account the impact of the concussion, you look at a guy whose numbers are underwhelming, but without the context of the season and maybe seeing what he did at the end of the Michigan State game against Cassius Winston and seeing how he played against Illinois and what he did before he got hurt and the fact that he was shooting 40% from three-point range, I mean, that was, maybe an honorable mention all Big Ten level player as a freshman. And I don't think people quite project that. And if you do, that kind of changes the complexion of this team. So, a couple others that I think is underestimating the potential impact of the Deron Davis-Joey Brunk duo, because Indiana's offense, especially the shooting, was a lot better with Deron on the floor last year. Do you realize we scored 0.1 point per possession more with Deron on the floor than with him off? And so if you get a healthy, in-shape Deron, again, big if, and then Joey Brunk, I think, Coach, as we've talked about, is the missing vocal and emotional leader that this program needed. And look, I know all the other teams, they probably have these things you could go down to that we don't know about, but just looking at it from the Indiana perspective, I think those are some things that without being deeply embedded into the context of the situation, you might not get. And I think if you start adding those things up and the injury luck is better, and, look, the other thing is there were 3 games last year that Indiana lost, on a Deron Davis tap-in miss, a Matt Harms tap-in, and Jordan Bohannon shooting bonanza. You're 3 of those away from being 20-12, making the NCAA tournament, and the total complexion being different for this season, even though all the players are the same. So that's what I look at, Coach, as stuff that the media is missing, that when you start to make the argument for why Indiana reasonably can be looked at as maybe a 5th or 6th or 7th best in the Big Ten, that's the stuff that I look at and hold on to as we head into the season.
Indiana's a hard team to project, and that's why they're sitting at 10 and 11 in these projections, because there's a lot of question marks. But if those all remain question marks, then Indiana's going to have a real tough year. But some of those are going to blossom. And I'll go back to Archie's first year. He had 3 players leave for the pros from that roster. And Juwan Morgan wasn't Juwan Morgan quite yet, and Rob Johnson was the best player coming back. And finished, I believe, 6th in the Big Ten at 9-9, or 6th or 7th that year when we lost to Rutgers in the first year under Archie Miller. Last year had a lot of injuries, and even the best player, the 5-star, had the wrist injury and finished 9th in the Big Ten. And I think the Big Ten's going to take a step backwards. And then coming to your part about the bigs, the coaching staff has worked all year in developing an offense, and they hinted in the talk in Evansville that it might be a little bit bigger lineup and a little more cutting and screening and post-oriented. And so the points that Romeo got was at the rim, and Juwan got a lot at the rim. Those points at the rim are going to look differently in style or in design. And then, if the 3-point shooting's better. But again, those are things that are being done in the film room and in the coaching room that aren't shared out for obvious reasons, that the media just has to go on numbers and stats. And there are a ton of questions for Indiana, but Archie has proven, to me at least, that first year that he took a bunch of questions and was competitive. And if you erase a couple nightmare games there, what could have possibly made a run, and was still over 500 in his first year with a brand new ball club.
And you may have noticed that we haven't talked about Jerome Hunter yet. And I put him in the category of something that none of us can really know. Like the news is better. Dustin Dopirak had a great article with comments from Archie Miller that sounded very positive about Jerome, taking contact and possibly being able to play. And I think we're all very excited about what that could mean. He's also a guy who's been out of basketball for a year. And so, I like kind of looking at how Indiana can be without even really projecting that. And I've kind of been looking at that as a bonus anyway, all offseason. Dylan, as you look at this, are there any other – one more thing I want to mention too, Dylan, is pack line teams often see a big bump in year 3 with the defense. That would help offset some of the potential scoring issues. I haven't really seen that mentioned. Anything else, any other areas that you think that some of these preseason projections are getting wrong or ignoring or just not mentioning about Indiana?
Well, I mean, I will say that, you talked about Deron Davis and how they were much better with him on the floor last year. And I feel like off-season projections, I mean, a lot of people, when you think about Indiana basketball, they just like kind of looked at what Romeo did, what Jawan did, and now that everyone's left, they're just kind of like, well, this is what they have, and look what they did without their two best, this is them without their two best players from last year. Who are they? How they're gonna even come together this year? But and with Duran's, what he does is he just brings the defense in, and Archie's he says Duran's a great passer from in the post, and as we've mentioned, they might go with like a 3 forward lineup this year. We don't know, because you got Justin Smith, who he can even kind of elevate his game. I think he had a bit of a wrist injury last year. No one really talked about it, but I mean, I don't know if he'll do a lot of outside shooting, but I mean, he's still a really athletic guy who can help out. I mean, if they do that 3 forward lineup, I mean, Indiana will just look a whole lot different without, having 3 guards on the floor. We're used to seeing Devonte, Al, and Rob, but if you kind of take one of those guys out and put another big in there, then, they'll have a lot of big guys, a lot of pressure down low in the paint, and that'll create more opportunities for open threes, which, as you mentioned, it should be a lot better this year. So I think those are probably the biggest areas for improvement. And, you mentioned Jerome Hunter. I know we haven't seen him play, but honestly, I think if he's healthy and he plays, I mean, I think he's a game changer. I think he was like the second highest rated recruit behind Romeo in that class. And
he won a gold jersey right before they discovered the condition, I guess.
Yeah, right. And, I mentioned earlier when I introduced myself that I covered the women's basketball team in March after one of the women's basketball games. There's nobody left in assembly. It was just kind of a few media guys. And Jerome came out with Al Durham, and they were doing like a workout together. And I mean, take it as much as you want because it's just a workout and they're just kind of shooting. But I was able to watch him for a while, and I mean, he just looks like a straight up baller. I mean, he's 6'7", 220 pounds. He was moving good. His jump shot is pure. It's really nice. I mean, I just think that
you're getting everybody excited, Dylan.
I know, but like that's because I'm excited.
What are you doing?
That's because I'm excited if Jerome is an act. If he can play, I honestly think he could be the best player on the team, the leading scorer. You never know. I'm just saying that I have high hopes.
He absolutely could be a top 25 player in the Big Ten as early as this year. He could be. I'm just trying to be careful about not setting unrealistic expectations for a guy who hasn't played in a year.
I agree with that.
Man, everything that you just said, I've thought too, and you've seen it, and that's why everybody gets so excited about the guy. And he's a basketball junkie, and he loves the game, and he's a gym rat. I mean, he's everything that you want, and I hope that he's healthy and that we can see it, because it would be fantastic. Oh man, Coach, I had a point that I was going to make, and now I forgot what it was about the team.
Yeah, I was
go ahead with your point.
When he first took over, Miller was talking about Jawan having to take over the responsibility for production.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting comment there about stepping up your game from 7 points a game as a sophomore to where he was at 16 points. And he has to take responsibility for production. Is that going to be Green, Smith, Finney, Davis? Those are hard to project. And when you're, sitting in Chicago and looking at the Indiana roster and you don't know what we do because we try to stay up with it, someone is going to do that. And Archie had a big jump there with a couple of players that first year. And who's going to be able to do that this year will really tell us if they move up from where they're projected up to more of a 5th, 6th, 7th, where a lot of us hope and maybe believe they're going to be.
The other thing I think that's important to remember from last year, and this is the last point, and then we'll move on, is, what were the 2 most impressive wins for Indiana? Obviously the Marquette game was, but I mean, in terms of opponent, it's beating Michigan State twice. Think back to those 2 games. In the game at Michigan State, Juwan Morgan got hurt and didn't play a lot in that game. And Romeo Langford, I got into a debate with Brendan Quinn about this on Podcast on the Brink. Romeo was 6 for 18 in that game. Struggled some defensively, did make some absolutely huge plays late, and that game doesn't make overtime, and we don't win without the 3 that he hit and that driving layup. So it's not to say he didn't contribute, but he really struggled and was inefficient as a scorer. It was the other guys who really stepped up and made big plays. Then think about the home game against Michigan State. I mean, it was in the building that night, and I remember just thinking how poorly Juwan and Romeo played for so much of the game. Now, they each made a couple big plays late, but that was a game where Justin Smith stepped up and Rob Finney stepped up, and it was other guys So we have seen it from these guys, and we've seen it in big wins in games when, the two people who everybody's lamenting their absence, and it is a big absence, don't get me wrong, but we've seen some of these other guys step up in big moments. And so, Coach, now as we look to, who has that responsibility for production, there are guys that haven't been counted on to do it consistently night in, night out, like Romeo and Juwan were, and that's a totally different responsibility. But we've seen it in flashes, and now Indiana, how good they do this season will be dependent on, can Devonte Green be a 15-point-a-game guy? Can Justin Smith be counted on, to be consistent? Can Deron Davis be healthy so that impact that he has on the offense is there all season long? If that stuff happens, Indiana's going to outperform these preseason projections. And if it doesn't, then unfortunately the projections are going to look pretty prophetic. And I think we all know which direction we want that to go in. All right, coming up in our third segment, we're going to answer some of your questions, including one about Mike Roberts and his recruiting connections. And then we might even dabble a little bit in our thoughts on this weekend's big football game against Ohio State. We'll see. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. We'll be right back. All right, good stuff. That was another 20-minute segment. We've got about 8 minutes left for this segment.
Hey, I don't know if you know this, Jerod, Coach. You might know it, but at Mother Bear's, they got rid of the Archie pizza.
They did?
Yeah, they used
Why?
to have it. I don't know. It's not on the menu anymore. I haven't found out the reason yet, but
wasn't there a story when he first got there, like before maybe like his family had moved, that he was eating Mother Bear's pizza like every night, and that was his favorite pizza? Isn't that how they came up with that pizza?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it's no longer there. And it's been at both of them. I've been at the one on 3rd Street and then the new one, and it hasn't been on the menu.
Wasn't it jalapenos or something on there? Pepperoni?
Yeah, one time.
Jalapenos?
One time me and Cam actually had it. It was pretty good.
What's the restaurant down in town that has burgers and stuff? They used to have the Kevin Wilson burger and Opie Taylor's.
Oh, I've never been there.
Yeah, okay, so now that you're in your final go-around here in Bloomington, what are like some of your bucket list things in Bloomington that you haven't done that you're absolutely going to do now before you graduate?
I haven't been to any of like the lakes around here. Like I haven't been to Lake Monroe or Griffey Lake. I haven't been out to any of those. So I want to see that.
Can you still get out to the limestone quarry? Can you still go down there?
I don't think so, but I think kids still try to do it, but I think you can get in trouble for it. But I mean,
a good friend and I spent the night out there one time.
Really?
It was, yeah.
That's cool.
It was awesome. It was really, really cool.
I spent one afternoon out there diving off stuff, and
yeah, we took sleeping bags and stuff and just decided like stay out there, and we slept out there. And there were some people working there that like kind of woke us up the next morning. It was not particularly comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
But it was, it's just one of those things. It's like you go to school in Bloomington, stay the night at the rock quarries.
I
probably wasn't safe either. I don't know what we were thinking, but
watching Breaking Away and those guys jumping off that one rock into the quarry.
Jay said they're closed off now.
Yep.
That's a shame. That is a shame. Okay, so chat mob folks, if you guys have any burning questions, we didn't get a ton of questions this week, so we'll hit a couple of these and we can talk about them for a little while. But if you guys do have questions, feel free to stick them in here. And anything else on that last topic that we didn't get to, Dylan or Coach? About do you
guys think that the Big Ten has taken a step back as a whole this year, which might benefit a team like Indiana? I mean, even the top
totally. Michigan
State's going to be good, but there are questions with, I think, Ohio State and Maryland, and then that 7-team tier can go,
I mean, Ohio State and Maryland would be like 5th or 6th in a good Big Ten.
Yeah,
they should not be 2nd or 3rd. I mean, just look at you lost some stars, from last year. I mean, some really, really good proven players. Now that allows for new guys to step up, but yeah, I think there's a talent drain, and they only brought in one 5-star recruit. So yeah, I don't think it'll be as good. Like I would be a lot more pessimistic about this Indiana team in like the 2013 Big Ten.
Right.
But I mean, you start looking at all the teams, and it's like, all right, I can kind of see how you would rank them ahead of Indiana. but they're not far ahead of Indiana, and that, I mean, I think it's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like, even if they do take a step back, I mean, within the conference, it's just going to be insanely competitive again.
Yeah, Michigan State's going to go 20-0, and then the next best team is going to be like 13-7.
I have a lot of respect for Painter at Purdue from a coaching perspective, but I think they're going to take a couple steps back simply because they're relying on freshmen and sophomores they've had Swanigan for a couple of years. They have had Hummel. They've had that dynamic. And unless you project Wheeler or this the grad transfer to come in and be able to score, I mean, even Klein and Dylan, you said it well. Eifert was just a hustle guy and get his 4 or 5 points. When they just relied on that a lot. So I think they're going to take a step back. I think Iowa without Bohannon, they won 6 real close games last year, and karma happens, so.
Bohannon. Man.
Hey, Chad had a good question in there, but he said it might be for after dark, but about the California pay rule that just came out.
Yeah, that's right.
If you wanted to do that on air or you want to do that off air.
I mean, that's better than – all right, we can hit these questions real quick, and then, let's try and talk about that. And if not, we can use that as carryover and do it like after the close.
And John Joven has about chemistry.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I know that too well.
Yeah, I don't.
Mike Roberts' question, be able to help coach our big man screen. Yeah, hopefully, Jeff. Okay. I hope that's true. So,
all right. So Dylan, as we do this, we do have a hard out on this one because for the radio segments, it has to end at 50 minutes. So if you're talking and you hear this,
that's it. We're done. No more questions.
Then that means we have to cut it off and we'll do the outro music. But then as soon as the outro music is over, we keep recording. And then if there's like stuff to pick up, that can go on the podcast. It just won't make it into the radio show.
Okay.
There's 3 different audiences that we record this for: the radio audience, the podcast audience, and the YouTube audience. Okay. It can be a little confusing to keep it all together.
Will this be on the podcast?
He's been here for 9 years and he still doesn't get how it goes. Okay. Let's do this. Here we go.
Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the assembly call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
All right, thanks, Ethan. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Coach Brian Tonsoni and our special guest this week, Dylan Wallace, one of our 2 student interns for this season. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU News Roundup, even during the offseason, and after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis, some of which Dylan will be writing this year, especially after the late 9 o'clock tip games. Get excited for that, Dylan.
Florida State.
Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. Hey, I have to stay up with you to eventually edit it and put it out, so I'm right there with you. Again, IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's time now for the mailbag, guys. These questions submitted via our private IU basketball discussion community, assemblycall.com/community, where Coach is just absolutely tearing it up with his new coaching corner segments. Those have been fun, Coach. I look forward to seeing what you have coming up next on those. It's a lot of fun. Real quick, my question to you: what's your goal with that sequence of content?
I maybe a little scouting of what I would do against a team ahead of a big game, or maybe just evaluating one aspect of play. The question that's coming up now about the defense in the Wisconsin game, the post defense on our friend Ethan Happ. I'm trying to find tape on that to answer that question. I think that's good to show 3 or 4 clips and analyze that.
Cool.
So along those lines,
it's that content alone is worth the price of the membership to that community, and then you get great conversation with all kinds of IU fans. All right, let's hit some of these questions. So Robert wants to know, what connection, if any, does Mike Roberts have with international recruits? This was talked about when he was hired because the best player on UNCG last year was an international player. Mike obviously had a big hand in bringing him over. I don't know the extent of his connections overseas. He obviously has some experience doing it. What I do know, and what I did find extremely impressive, and this was from an article by Dustin DePierac in The Athletic, is how deep Robert's contacts are in Indiana, because he's kept up with high school coaches in Indiana, even while he hasn't been really recruiting Indiana. Some great anecdotes in there. Kyle Simpson, a longtime, basketball coach in Indiana, good friend of Mike, and just how he has stayed in contact with him and other coaches. So now that it's almost like, it really feels like he was kind of preparing to get this job all along at some point, and that he really wanted to be back here. And so, you see stuff like that, Dylan, and again, that hire for some people might not have been a home run the moment it was announced, but there has not been one thing I have heard since he was announced that hasn't made me really excited about what he can be as an assistant coach. And this was just another one, because the little things matter, especially as an assistant coach, and he does the little things.
Yeah, I mean, and Dustin wrote a really nice article, and I mean, to your point, the just connections that he kept with Indiana and that he's going to be able to use in the future as, recruiting pool to get players to come play for the program. And to answer the international question, I mean, obviously we don't know, but the detail Dustin goes into about how he's kept that connection with everybody in Indiana, I mean, he probably does that in a lot of different places. So perhaps when he was kind of internationally recruiting, he made connection with those people and he kind of texts frequently with them. So I just think, the approach he takes to things, I think that's promising no matter where he was, and he'll probably be able to use that to better the program.
And he sends handwritten notes, which remains my favorite little detail about him. Hey, that stuff makes a difference in this day and age. Coach, any thoughts on Mike Roberts? I have to think you're pretty excited about him.
Yeah, I think, if Archie likes him, I'm going to like him. And I don't mean that because of my crush on Archie. It's just, it's important as a head coach to have assistants you trust. And Archie brought him in, and he has connections to the Indiana coaches, and he seems to be a really hard worker. And I think that, Andy said it last week, it just fits the mold of all the recruits and that mindset that we're thinking about coming in that Archie so badly wants. And I think he fills that role.
From Rick, he says, with 4 scholarships open, I was surprised to hear Archie say 4 to 6. He's talking about comments Archie made at his Evansville talk on Rick's question. He certainly hasn't over-recruited yet, as Crean often did. Do you think he would actually sign 5 or 6, which would obviously force 1 or 2 players to leave? So, look, I think if Dawson Garcia, Caleb Love, and R.J. Davis all called tomorrow and said, we'll come, you would accept those commitments and you would figure something out. And does that mean that someone might be, quote-unquote, creamed or run off or whatever you say? Maybe. I don't know exactly how those conversations would go, but when you're recruiting at this level and you would get commitments from those guys, you would take them. Now, what I think is much more realistic is there's still the 1 open scholarship. Obviously, they're targeting Dawson Garcia heavily, as we talked about. But to me, what I think Archie meant more by that, Coach, is just kind of an implicit acknowledgement of the reality of college basketball, which is that, we're going to have, a guy like Justin Smith is going to graduate, and he could have options as a grad transfer if he's not pleased with what his role is this year. And don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying that's likely or anything. It's just a potential example. So you could have guys transfer out. There could be a lot of things that happen. We see guys transfer all the time. So I think, it's good to have your options open. You're going to keep recruiting guys, and you just see off seasons are topsy-turvy. So, I think it's unlikely that Indiana gets enough commitments from these high-profile guys they're targeting that you would have 5 or 6 guys committed now and then have to be in that position. But what I do think is more likely is maybe a player or 2 leaving the program only because it's just college basketball and that's what happens.
Yeah, I also, you can quietly put pressure on people too. I still think there's some question marks on the roster that I think this year it's time to step up, where there's going to be hard conversations about what options are available and whether that's someone who's already graduated or has to be a transfer or whatever. Archie is really in need of getting his guys in. And I think this is a year you're either in or you're out. And that could be a little subtle message behind the scenes. Archie displaying a little toughness that maybe he needed at some point last year.
I know someone mentioned in the chat mob that maybe someone could redshirt. Just to clarify, that wouldn't affect the scholarships. Redshirts are still on scholarship, so it's the same total number. Dylan, did you take that any other way?
No, basically kind of the same way you guys took it. I mean, I know Archie mentioned that, because obviously they only got Trace and Armand for this season, so he did mention that for the 2020 class he wanted to really get some big guys. And so far you got Anthony Leal, Trey Galloway, Jordan Geronimo, all pretty good players, but I think they're still looking for kind of that big name. You mentioned Dawson Garcia, Christian Lander is going to take a visit here during Hoosier Hysteria. We know Caleb Love is probably not. He canceled his visit here. So I mean, if they do get multiple of those guys do decide they want to come here, then yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could, as Coach said, kind of quietly force somebody out. It's kind of the all-in year for Archie and trying to get that big 2020 class that he really emphasized that he wanted.
All right, Coach, 5 seconds. Indiana, Ohio State. Who do you have winning?
Ohio State, sadly.
Oh, come on, Dylan. Quick.
Michael Penix probably won't play, so probably Ohio State.
That's it. We're done. No more questions.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for producing most of the music that you hear on the show. And as always, thank you for listening. We will talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, James Blackman Jr. Keep your elbows in, eyes on the rim, and get buckets. Go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right. Good stuff, gents. So do you want to talk about the California thing real quick? Because I do think it's pretty interesting. I'd be up for a quick chat about it.
I mean, I don't know the details. I'd have to read up about it a little bit. But here's my take. I think Chad asked that question. I've always been, hey, you got a scholarship, and you get food, and you get gear, and you get all that stuff. That's what normal college students don't get. Go be an amateur athlete. But the money in the game, from the shoe companies to all of the stuff, has gotten to be ridiculous, to the point that we have scandals in the greatest sport, I think, is college basketball. And one of the ways that I'm starting to move to is get money out to athletes on the table, above the table, not below the table, and might limit some of the negative and wrongdoing that's going on by agents and some of the shoe companies. With that being said, I think it really needs to be studied, done fairly. Maybe a trust fund where you can take a percentage of that and spend it when you're in college, but after you graduate or after you spend 3 years or whatever, that money then becomes yours. And it can't be a situation where it's the New York Yankees buying the best team in college basketball, because that takes the spirit of college athletics out. So there's a lot of question marks to getting paid. But, if they're selling your jersey and the university only gets the money for it, from a business standpoint, economics teacher here, I don't know how fair that is to continue that with the massive amounts of money that are being made off of young people. I'm changing, and I guess old dogs can be, taught new tricks, because I have been really adamant about not paying players and not giving them money. But I think maybe that's starting to, let's do it right if we're going to do it. But I'm starting to think it's fair.
And the colleges don't have to be the ones to pay. Here's the thing with the California thing. And if you're interested in this, I highly recommend the most recent episode of the Ion College Basketball Podcast with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander. They really do a good job of breaking this down. But essentially, California, the legislature has passed a bill. It's assumed that the governor will sign it, that would make it illegal for universities to prohibit student athletes from making money off of their name, image, and likeness. Where that becomes an issue is, obviously, that's against NCAA rules. So, say Stanford was going to prohibit, one of their players or prohibit their athletes from the name, image, and likeness. Now they're in violation of California law. But if they allow it, now they're in violation of NCAA bylaws, and the NCAA could theoretically keep them out of championships, keep them from the NCAA tournament or whatever, UCLA, USC, all the schools in California. Where this gets really interesting is if 4 or 5 different states pass this, now you've got a snowball that starts moving. What's the NCAA going to do? Are they just going to keep, North Carolina and California and all these states out of the championships, or are they eventually going to have to bend and give in a little bit? And, the committee that they put together said they were already going to look at this. And yes, there are, some potentially unintended consequences of allowing players to profit from the name, image, likeness. But, as those guys talked about, would it really be that much different from how college basketball is already? Because, the big fear, Dylan, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, is say that, Indiana players can profit off their name, image, and likeness, right? And you're recruiting Yogi Ferrell. And there's a restaurant in Bloomington called Yogi's. And the owner of Yogi's is like, hey, we're going to give you $100,000 a year to be the spokesperson for Yogi's, which is just would have been the most perfect thing ever and should have happened. And it's a damn shame that it didn't happen. But, now that's a recruiting benefit potentially for Indiana, right? And it's like, well, okay, but don't the biggest schools kind of already have facilities and all these other things that, kind of have some people as the haves and the have-nots? I don't really think, in a big picture sense, it would really change college basketball all that much, like the hierarchy all that much. I think it would change some of the tactics and some of those things, but it would allow boosters who are giving money to the university anyway, or giving it to the athletic department, to actually redirect some of that directly to the athletes. And to me, I think that's a good idea. Now, again, I agree with Coach. You got to study it. You got to make sure that you don't do something irresponsible. But I really have a hard time seeing in the big picture how this wouldn't be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't see this, so I don't really know too much about it. I have to do my research, but
yeah, we didn't prep you for this on the run sheet. Sorry.
No, you didn't.
Well, it opens up stuff. Chad just mentioned something about, okay, Adidas says we'll give you 100,000, but you got to go to IU and we'll put your name on a shoe or something. And what about the big booster who gives, we're going to give you $1 million to come to our school, and then part of that is we're going to sell posters or something with your name on it, and we're going to hide it as you're making money off the likeness. That's
what worries
me, though. Yeah, but
how is that different in a bad way from the way that it's done now? Because there's already an arms race kind of like that. This just puts the money directly into the hands of the athletes.
True, because, I've had 2 kids involved in 2 different basketball programs. One's in the Big Ten, and everyone got everything there. And the difference between Indiana State, and what they get in their program. So you got to recruit kids now. It's not going to the young people. It's going, it's facilities, like you said, and those races. So, yeah, that's why I'm starting to change my mind that, again, the amateur thing is might be a thing of the past. Especially when coaches are making tons of money, and we got into it about the Clemson situation a while back about giving a ring to a player who'd been there for a while and quit on the team. And there's just so much money. I do think players need to, and I don't know if you could cap it for fairness to where they're getting more than what they're getting now, or I don't know if that's right either, but it worries me. But I do think the young people,
I agree. It worries me too, just because we're used to a different system. Like that, everything is different from the system that we grew up with and have gotten used to. So it does worry me a little bit because it's different and it's changed, and I'm sure be unintended consequences and some bad stories where it's like, oh, well, we shouldn't have done this. But it's like, yeah, but look at all the other athletes now that are getting more money that they can really use because of this. So I hope to see other states do this. I hope it forces the NCAA's hand. I would like to see this happen, personally.
I like Jay, as long as we get the NCAA basketball and football games back on the gaming systems. That's the only thing. Pay them for that only. Get those games out. Give them a stipend, and they can go to get Archie's Pizza at the.
By the way, Joe Vaughn in the chat said, next up, paying high school players. What do you think about that, Coach?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, but the high school coaches, look at all the money that they're making.
Come on. Yeah, exactly. It's rolling in.
Funnel some of that assistant coach cash to the players.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Dylan, thanks for being here. Excellent job. It's not an easy thing to hop on a show with people who have kind of an established chemistry and an established way of doing things. So you did a really good job, I thought, of coming in and making some good points.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It was fun. I hope I can come on a few more times, maybe.
Yeah,
good job.
Absolutely. And we always, for the interns, we always like to give you guys opportunities to come on. And I know that you guys will be covering all the home games. Do you know how many road games you and Cam are going to be going to this year? Because those are good opportunities to come on the show. Road games.
We planned out a decent amount. But gosh, I don't know the number off the top of my head. But I think we want to go to Wisconsin. We want to go to UConn and MSG. We want to go to obviously Notre Dame because that's just right in Indy.
Are you going to drive to those?
Wisconsin, yes. We'll probably fly to New York.
Yeah.
That's like the big one we're trying to pull off. But we'll definitely go to Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan. So it's just like the far ones. Like we actually thought about going to Penn State, so maybe we'll do that too. But like Rutgers and Maryland, no.
Just be careful at Penn State. If you guys talk too loud, your conversation will be picked up audibly on the broadcast.
Oh, I remember that.
There's no one there.
Yeah.
Didn't they have the Whistler, or not the Whistler,
yes.
Vanderbilt baseball, but there was something.
Wasn't that Northwestern?
Northwestern. There's a couple places. Penn State had some crowd noise issue behind the broadcast.
It just sounds like there's 17 people there. Like it's insane. Well, cool. So there'll be opportunities. Obviously, we do the show every Thursday night, so there will be plenty of opportunities to come on. And hope you can. And then Banner, that's the other thing. I forgot to talk about Banner Morning, but I guess we can talk about it now. You and Cam, one Banner Morning already came. Are you going to be doing those too, or is just Cam going to be doing those?
I'll be doing the next one. So on Monday, that'll be me. Yeah, can I adopt the James Blackman? Keep your eyes in, or keep your elbows in, eyes on the rim, and get buckets.
Sure. Yeah, I like how he ad-libbed on that one.
Yeah,
in true James Blackman fashion. He had the quickest turnaround on the cameo of everybody. I sent it to him. I got it back like right away. Perfectly done on script. I was very impressed. Very impressed with James. All right. Awesome. Good stuff. Go meet Coach in the tailgate. Hopefully the Hoosiers, can make it a fun Saturday. We usually play Ohio State tough.
Yeah. Hopefully it's close at least.
Maybe having the experience Peyton Ramsey in a close game will help.
Maybe
they got a new coach that they're still working in.
Yeah, they got a new offense.
Come on, Coach. Give me some optimism.
Beer will be cold, and the biscuits and gravy will be hot. And that is what is going to be the best thing about Saturday. I hope I'm wrong, and I'll be on the field jumping on the, uprights when we do it. But can
you imagine the celebration? It'll be so great. I remember what the celebration was like in 87 and 88 the last time it happened.
This
fathom.
True story, Jerod. You'd appreciate this because your dad, and I don't know if your dad was down there coaching, but Mallory's first win broke a 16-game losing streak.
In 85?
In 85. I was a freshman, 2 weeks, jumped up, ripped the goalpost down. 6 of my buddies from right quad put it over our shoulders, ran it up through the parking lot. We got behind Briscoe. Cops come squealing. Drop it or go to jail. And I'm saying, oh, my gosh, I'm at college 2 weeks. I'm going to jail, and not for anything really fun. It was stealing an upright. But
not for anything fun?
Well,
that's amazing.
I mean, getting drunk on campus or something like that. But
well, I was thinking the two things were happening simultaneously.
Yeah, well, they were. But one of our buddies had the goalpost pad, and he just took off. And so we were all disappointed, and we're walking back to the dorm, and we find him with like 3 beers in his hands, pouring it over his head, hugging the goalpost thing, and we rode on it. And that was we didn't have many dates back then. We dated the goalpost pad most of the freshman year. But
I stayed in right, too.
Did you really?
Good to know that historic moment happened in the building.
Oh, jeez.
Yep. Wright Ferguson was mine on the first floor.
Oh, boy. We dated the goalpost pad for most of freshman year. That's a sad commentary that's probably far too common.
Look at me. Who wants Mrs. T's probably listening to me up there, but who wants this?
Oh, man. That's a great story.
Yeah,
That is a great story. He probably wasn't on he might have been on the field by then. He was always up in the press box because he coached the secondary, so it was easier for him to see. But if it was, if the win was in the bag, then I don't know what that game was like. I was 4 then.
Yeah,
he might have been down on the field by then.
We almost got it back to right quad.
You're being applauded in the chat mob for bringing Assembly Call After Dark back. We haven't had a good Assembly Call After Dark TMI in a while, so this was good. Welcome, Dylan, to the Assembly Call. This is things get loose after after the radio show is done. Trying to be very, very professional for the radio show, and then between segment banter during the show, that's a little looser. But then AC After Dark.
Dylan, the one after dark, I met. I think I met someone that I kissed after the 1987 championship. She was on wasn't it Val that got I had to find the nicest looking lady. Yeah. And I might have been that guy hanging out of the car, various hugs and kisses. And she goes, all I remember is running to the fountain and kissing people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was running to the fountain and kissing people too.
Oh man, it might have been Val.
Might have been
Val. If you're listening, by the way, we're thinking about you and hoping everything is good. So, one of our longtime listeners.
Yep.
Hopefully, she made it this far into the show. All right, everybody, let's call it a night. Dylan, thanks for being here.
Of course,
Coach. Coach.
Yep.
September 26th.
Yep.
You can host, right?
I can host.
Because Andy and I are both out. Okay.
And Ryan
just wanted to double check. No, he'll be fine. He'll be here.
No, didn't he say he was? Well, he didn't want
us
to say.
No, it's another day.
Oh, okay. I thought in that exchange he was not going to be there on the 26th.
No, he should be fine. I'm going to be gone, and Andy's going to be gone.
Okay. Yep.
So yeah, as long as you can host. So if we need to go over anything beforehand,
I started preparing. You know, I'm old. I need 2 weeks of practice mental to be able to do it.
Aaron says make Ryan host.
No.
He was there when we were going over it, but I still don't feel comfortable. We agreed it would have to be the most epic of emergencies. If no one's available, like I might even trust Galen, who's never hosted the show and doesn't know the process to host before Ryan. All right, everybody, time to go post this thing. Dylan, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks
and
again.
We'll see you guys all next week.
See ya.
Chad says I'd do it before Ryan. Yeah, but you've hosted more shows than I don't know. Or no, maybe Aaron was it? Or no, Josh. I think he actually manned the controls, right? I don't remember, but you two guys did a good job hosting that show. I don't remember who actually manned the controls. I think it was Josh. But yeah, you could do it.